Thanks very much for coming. My name is Alta Charo. I'm from the University of Wisconsin Law and Medical Schools, and we're very glad to have you here to talk today about a subject that has become increasingly urgent, and that is the subject of the pattern that's been developing of patients traveling around the United States and around the rest of the world in search of what they hope will be treatments for various kinds of disorders, sometimes terminal and desperate, that use something that they are told is a stem cell, whether or not it actually is. Can I have the first set of slides up, please? And the projector on? Okay. I'm going to let them do that, and let's just talk for a little while they sort that out. One of the really interesting dilemmas that we faced from the very beginning with this particular workshop was how to even describe what it is that we are talking about. So you'll notice that in the original titles, we talked about trying to assure the quality and safety of unregulated stem cell therapies. And this in and of itself began to pose a bit of a dilemma because it could give the impression that what we were talking about was trying to find a way to endorse the increasingly frequent practice of offering what we call stem cell therapies, even though they have not been through any kind of formal regulatory oversight. Do you need my thumb drive? Would that help you guys? Sure. If you'll excuse me just a moment. And the reason we called it unregulated, here you go, guys. The reason we call it unregulated is not because we've made a conclusion that it is not vulnerable or subject to regulation or that there's no jurisdictional authority. We are not going to speak to that. We know that there's litigation over that point, at least here in the United States. We know that the regulatory coverage for these kinds of treatments is complicated by the subtleties of how it is that in the U.S. we regulate biologics, particularly the question of whether or not a particular biological material has been manipulated enough and is being used in a way different enough from its ordinary function that it now comes under FDA jurisdiction as a medical product. But we also, we didn't want to in any way suggest, thank you, I'm beginning to see it's starting to show up. We didn't want to suggest that we understood or had concluded what the jurisdictional role should be. But we also knew that even if there is complete jurisdiction in the US and in other countries, it's possible that that jurisdiction has not been thoroughly used for various reasons having to do with the dilemmas associated with enforcement. And so we're continuing to have a little bit of a problem here, not knowing how I can get this thing to go forward. There you go. Do I just have to tell you guys to move it for me? Okay. So we talked about some other possibilities. One is unapproved, right? We talked about the possibility of simply saying that if these are unapproved, i.e. they should have gone through a regulatory treatment, regulatory process and they didn't, that would be what we were going to focus on. But the trouble with unapproved would be that some of them are in a regulated environment, but they just haven't yet been approved. They're pre-approved, as some of our colleagues would have called them, because they're in clinical trials, whether in US or elsewhere. We could have talked about unproven. And unproven would certainly be suggestive of unapproved if you think of proven as only being true if it's proven to the satisfaction of a regulatory authority. But we also know that in other contexts, there are many things that are proven in the sense that the professional community has decided these things are well documented, well supported by studies, even if they're off-label and haven't been vetted and given a good seal by a regulatory agency. And so, having gone through these things, we found ourselves kind of at a loss for the right title. What we did want to communicate was this, that whether subject to the formal regulatory oversight of a body like the Food and Drug Administration or the EMA, whether through professional licensure and discipline at the local level, or whether through professional society norms and certifications, whether through the use of the civil system in the United States through private law like medical malpractice, we have a world of possibilities for how to regulate all kinds of medical treatments and the products that they use, but we are finding ourselves in a situation where it's not clear that they are yet being regulated. Next slide, please. We also know that these treatments hold tremendous potential for a wide range of illnesses. So on the one hand, we want to alert patients to the possibility that they are being exposed to things that are not proven, not approved, not regulated, and in fact possibly dangerous. And on the other hand, we want to make sure we don't oversell the idea that these things are not ready for prime time. We want to make sure people know that the potential is there and that the clinical trials are beginning to get started, and that we do expect to see the day when regenerative medicine will fulfill all of its promise. And so it's a very narrow line that we're trying to walk here. So what we're going to focus on today is the kind of global pattern of treatments and products that are being offered, and trying to understand the range of things being offered, the range of patient experiences, and the range of options we have to try and maximize the well-being of patients, either by protecting them from things that are dangerous or ineffective, or by helping steer them to those things that are responsible. Next slide, please. Now, Paul Knepfler from the UC Davis School of Medicine has very kindly helped us all out by publishing these maps. This one gives an indication of the number of studies that use anything that is described as a stem cell, and you can see the red is the one that indicates the most frequent, the largest number of stem cell studies, US, then Europe, then China. That encompasses all different kinds of stem cells. Next slide. If you look just at mesenchymal, however, you begin to see a somewhat different pattern developing, in which we begin to see China as the site for the largest number of studies, followed by Europe and then the United States. This may be an indication of where the research is going. It may be an indication of different reporting levels to clinicaltrials.gov. It could be an indication that we have some definitional questions in front of us about what we call mesenchymal stem cell, and whether or not we're actually able to capture the data in an accurate fashion. So we're going to talk a little bit during the course of the day about how people describe things to patients and where the possibilities for confusion exist. Next slide. Now, for the following set of slides, I'd like to just shout out to my assistant, Jennifer Carter, who's a third-year student at the University of Wisconsin Law School. I set her out to look at Amazon.com. Next slide. She looked for those things that have stem cell in the title of the product. Just to give you an idea, you're going to enjoy the next set of slides. Thank you very much, Jennifer. So we have the Sunday Riley Stimulant Perfecting Stem Cell Serum. Next slide. Which is an example of what is probably consumer fraud, at least to the level of $295 American. Continue, next slide. It doesn't seem to have anything related to what we think of as stem cells. It has plant stem cells from Edelweiss. I want to start singing when I hear that. Next slide. And if you were to Google Sunday Riley Stimulant Perfecting Stem Cell Serum, this is what you bring up, right? Next. Click. Now, what Jennifer, you're going to do these one at a time. Jennifer looked at these pages. In the yellow, you see actual listings for the product she searched for, the Sunday Riley Stimulant Perfecting Stem Cell Serum. But then you begin to see what else is mixed up on these pages, and this is how we begin to understand the experience of people who are looking for stem cells of any sort. So now you see serum ingredients including human adult stem cells for some other kind of product. So we're already beginning to see some mix-up on the pages. Next slide. We have lots of these different products on Amazon. This could have been a much longer slide set with even better pictures. But we've got facial cream. Next slide. Now, not so expensive. And here's what it looks like when you go to it. Next slide. More facial creams, the stem cell therapy. I love the before and after pictures on all of these things. Next slide. Again, not so expensive. Next. And the personal testimonials, right? But you'll notice now we've got some testimonials saying it didn't really do anything. Others say it's great. Next slide. Here we actually begin to see the pseudoscientific explanations about the stimulation of your own skin's stem cell, the notion of clinically tested, which is a kind of catchphrase that many people might assume is truly scientific. Next. When you go and Google this, click once over there, please. You find what was searched for, the stem cell therapy. You also see advertisements for scientific equipment. Click once. And now you begin to see an ad for the Surgery and Stem Cell Treatment Center for Spinal Conditions. So we're beginning to see things that are truly mixing up the cosmetic with the purportedly medical and therapeutic. Next. And so here's the Laser Spine Institute that was referenced in the previous slide. And this is the RegenaDisc, right, which provides stem cell tissue transplantation into a painful and degenerative lumbar disc of the spine after low-level laser spinal decompression for pain relief. So now mixing up a standard surgical procedure with this assertion of stem cells as an adjuvant therapy that will somehow make this different. Next slide. We get to Derma Swiss Nanosphere Plus Stem Cell Serum, and I put this in here because one of the problems that we've run into is the problem of the magic word. So stem cells has become kind of a magical catchphrase. It sounds futuristic and wonderful. Nanotechnology has also got that same kind of special air of new and wonderful. And so now you get here a 2-for-1 in which they've got stem cells and nanospheres in the same product to try to draw people to it. Next. Only $55. Next. Here is what it looks like on the box. And the next slide, please. I show you only because the picture is just like not got to be missed. This is the Nano Gold Stem Cell Therapy Collagen Mask. So, having enjoyed ourselves, take the next slide. With the active ingredients apparently having nothing to do with anything with stem cells, continue. We go back to Amazon. Look for the product on Amazon. Next. You will find the product that you searched for. Those are the yellows. Next. Now you get something about cord blood banking, which is this world of things that includes legitimate kinds of activities and at least one FDA-approved product that's built on cord blood. But you also are beginning to see, continue, unapproved U.S. treatments. These are U.S.-based treatments. It really should have been unapproved U.S. products used in a treatment, to be more specific, because the FDA regulates products and not treatments. Next. And on the same page, we also get an unapproved U.S. treatment and, next, something outside the United States entirely, now based in Panama. I just bring this up because I think it's important for us to recognize that if you are a non-medical specialist and you are simply looking for information and you're typing in stem cell, you are getting a mix of information that makes it almost impossible to discern the difference between those things that are long-standing therapies with products that have been regulated and approved by the FDA or an equivalent regulatory authority in Europe, Australia, Japan, etc. Or you might also be looking at things that are completely unapproved in the United States, outside the United States, for conditions that even have never been studied before with any cell like this, all mixed up together with no indication of which one is real and which one is illusory. Next. This is an example of what you would call up if you were to click on these things. Here's the cordblood.com, which talks about FDA-regulated clinical trials, but then also talks about other clinical trials, and I'm not sure exactly what those others are, if they're clinical trials but not being regulated by FDA. Continue. But then it also brings up StemGenics, which has, if you look at the bottom, stem cell facelifts, stem cell hand rejuvenation, age management, a whole range of conditions that are associated with stem cells. Remember, this is all on the same page as our nano stem cell collagen mask. Next. And then here's from the Panama Stem Cell Institute, which again is now advertising some kind of treatment for a wide range of conditions. Next. And finally, we get to stemcellcenter.com, which advertises that it is US-based. Its cells have never been outside the US, so it's using this as an advertising tool, I presume, to try to engender confidence on the part of the patients, because it's all very local, it's all very familiar. So for US-based patients, this should seem even more credible than something that is being offered out of Panama. But you'll also note some very interesting language that they have on their website, which clearly reflects this ongoing debate and resistance to FDA regulation. If you look at the bottom left here with the pullout, you'll see it says, first of all, we're not saying that any of these studies would relate to your particular condition, nor that it would be an effective treatment, so don't believe us. We sound like it's wonderful. We're going to rejuvenate you. We provide stem cell therapy for a variety of conditions, but down below, we don't promise they work. And then it also talks about how autologous stem cell therapy is not an FDA-approved treatment. They are going to emphasize autologous, and further along, they're going to say stem cell therapy less than manipulated. These are all magic phrases to try and distinguish it from a product that would be regulated by the FDA, because FDA would regulate an allergenic transplant. They would regulate things that are more than minimally manipulated, and so this is very much trying to separate itself from the world of those things that are subject to U.S. enforcement by the FDA. And finally, trying to get out of the notion that they're advertising, marketing an unapproved medical product by noting that these journal articles that they're providing are not in any way advertisements. They are only for educational purposes. So we're seeing a really high degree of awareness on the part of these companies that we're in a very difficult zone where it looks like the FDA does in fact have jurisdiction, as much as they would not like to see them have jurisdiction. They're fighting it, but they're also trying to protect themselves. Next slide. So, given this complicated regulatory environment and the range of things we would like to do for patients, in the absence of the fully robust evidence base and the fully activated levels of regulatory oversight across the globe, we'd like to take a critical look at the current environment. We'd like to have a range of speakers talking about the kinds of things that are being advertised and offered to patients, what their potential benefits and risks might be, what the evidence is that is needed to substantiate clinical application of stem cell technologies in a responsible fashion, and what would be the legal hurdles to doing so in a regulated environment. And then finally, to examine all the potential avenues, whether through formal federal and national regulatory oversight bodies, through professional societies, through medical malpractice, or any other means to help enhance the quality of the stem cell treatments and the experience and the well-being of the patients who go through them. Next slide. So, with that, I'd like to simply give you an idea of who will be taking care of us for the rest of the day. Our first moderator is Ralph Cicerone, who's the president of the National Academy of Sciences. Ralph, did you? Oh, great, thank you. Next will be Ellen Feigl, who's senior vice president for research and development at the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine. Irv Weissman, Virginia and D.K. Ludwig Professor for Clinical Investigation and Cancer Research at Stanford. Amy Comstock-Rick, Chief Executive Officer of the Parkinson's Action Network. And then finally, at the end of the day, leading our conversation, Harvey Feinberg, President of the Institute of Medicine. So thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to ask Ralph to come up and to also offer the first set of speakers for our first panel to please come and take their seats in the front, and we'll begin.